Hey guys, welcome back. My name's Megan, this is Chiron Equine, and today what I want to walk you through is what's in my first aid kit. The reason I'm doing this today and in the barn is because both of these guys have hurt themselves in the last week, so I'm restocking and cleaning out the first aid kit anyway, and I thought I would go through what I think are essentials. So, I'm gonna break this into three categories: things everybody should absolutely have, things that are nice to have on hand, and things that you should chat with your vet about. Number one thing in your first aid kit, your vet's phone number. Number two thing in your first aid kit, a card or a chart or a piece of paper that says what the normal temperature, pulse, and respiration rates are for your horse. People refer to that as TPR. I will write it in the description so that you guys have a place to look it up if you need it, and I am also going to put together a printout for you guys to tape on top of your first aid kit with what's in it, so look for that in the description as well. After that, the next most important thing in your first aid kit is going to be a thermometer, and I have to figure out what I've done with mine because this has gotten a little disorganized over the last few days. So the reason I say thermometer is the next most important is because you're going to use it the most often. Pretty much anytime you call your vet with an issue, they are going to ask if you've checked your horse's temperature and what it was. Oh, there we go. I had it right in the first place. I have a little container that I keep a bunch of the smaller stuff in, so that it's easy to find, and that's a good tip as well. If you end up having a first aid kit as big as mine, most of you won't. Digital thermometer is great. If you don't have a digital thermometer and you have an older mercury one, you do want to make sure you tape a piece of string to the end so that it can't get lost inside your horse. This one tapers out wide enough that there's a good chance that won't happen, but if you're in an old farm and you see strings on the end of all the thermometers, that is exactly why. At least once a year, I want you to check the battery on your thermometer. So if you haven't done that lately, go out and do that tonight. Something to lube your thermometer is always nice for your horse. And then in terms of other things, I always want to have something on hand for washing wounds, and that's all over here. So for basic first aid stuff, you're going to want to have some sort of bucket. I like a steel bucket. I bought this one on Amazon. It's just really easy to sterilize and things. I'm never worried about a plastic bucket harboring bacteria in little nicks and scrapes. And I'm also not worried that this bucket is accidentally going to get used for shampooing a horse or grain or anything like that. Betadine is going to be your go-to for cleaning cuts and things. And then you're probably going to want to have a couple of larger syringes for flushing wounds, giving meds, things like that. Make sure you keep track of which syringes are still sterile and which ones aren't, because if you ever need to give something like a medication that you have to draw up out of a bottle, you don't want to use a syringe that's been used before because it will contaminate everything. So I keep all of my needles and syringes in a container like this. Whether you need needles or not is something you're going to discuss with your vet, though. I keep gauze squares around for washing wounds because it's really convenient and they're clean. But if you don't have something like this, then something like shop towels is also a really good option because they're lint-free. And if I have cuts and scrapes that are just on the skin or something I want to wash off, but I'm not so worried about keeping it totally sterile, I will use shop towels. Rubbing alcohol I mostly just use for cleaning tools. I never use this on cuts, but I definitely keep it around for cleaning my thermometer especially. That's when that gets used the most. Latex gloves or nitrile gloves you're going to want, because if you have more serious cuts, things that you don't want to get your fingers in so that you're not contaminating the horse, these are really handy. Also, just if there's gross stuff, that's sometimes nice to have. For putting on wounds, you want to have something like Dermagel, Hibitane's another popular one. Dermagel is my favorite though, and that is awesome for putting on cuts and scrapes. And that's right there to show you. I'm gonna put it in this bucket because I'm gonna need it tonight. But that is a vitoquinol product and I absolutely love it. You also might get something like flamazine or polysporin, which are antibacterial. Flamazine does have to come from your vet, at least in Canada, and you don't want to use something like that without at least sending a text to your vet first if you have that kind of relationship, because you don't want to cause any kind of antibiotic resistance. So that's something I would never use without at least touching base with my vet and making sure they're okay with it. Standing bandages are going to be important to have around, because if you need to wrap a wound, wrap a leg, these are handy. And usually you want 2 different sizes of these. So if you see here, I've got, for Hope, 14-inch bandages for the front and 16s for the back, and then a bunch of these to wrap over top of them. I've only got 3 here because she's wearing one. If you're getting into more major wounds, this is where you get into stuff that's nice to have but not necessary. Once you have a couple of horses, you're gonna have a major wound once or twice a year, so it's handy to keep this stuff around. If you've just got one horse, you're probably gonna be calling the vet for an emergency visit anyway, and then they can sell you all of these things. But what I like to have around is Conform gauze. So this is what I would use to hold a wound pad on a cut before I put a bandage like that on. And I just buy a box of it because it lasts. Something like Lightplast is what I'm gonna use to tape the top and bottom of my wraps if I need to turn out in them or something like that. This is gonna keep bedding from getting in the top and bottom if I'm wrapping with vet wrap, which is the next thing in my box. Again, this is something I buy the case because I also use it when I'm foaling for tail bandages. So this is the brand that a tack store near me carries, and I just buy full boxes of it. Also really, really nice to have a stethoscope. When I talked about TPR, this is how you are going to check pulse, and often it's the easiest way to check respiration as well. And that I just got from Amazon. You're gonna wanna have a pair of scissors, and I like to have one really sharp pair of scissors for cutting bandage materials, and then I also like to have a pair of bandage scissors. And let me see if I can find them to show you. Here we go. These are the ones with a blunt end, so when I'm cutting off a bandage, the side that's actually touching my horse is completely blunt. This is a weight tape, and it's nice to have for getting a better idea of dosages for medication. It's also handy to have around. I like to check my horses once a year just to see if they're sort of maintaining the same weight, and that's a good indicator of health as well. If they've suddenly gained or lost weight, that's a good way to tell. These are name brand generic from the drugstore, but these are like what's called Telfa pads. And that's sort of a gauze pad that's got a non-stick coating on one side so that you can put your Dermagel on the pad, put it on the wound, and then wrap it in place with your Conform gauze. And that's not going to stick to the wound as it oozes or starts to heal like a plain piece of gauze would. Other optional stuff, I always keep a roll of duct tape. Again, securing the end of bandages, securing Velcros if you have a horse that likes to pull their bandages off, super handy. And then this is just a different version of the sticky bandage that I showed you before. It's a little bit less stretchy. These are Animal Intex poultice pads. These are what I would use for a hoof abscess. So again, it's one of those things I keep around because I don't want to be stuck without it at 9 o'clock on a Friday. But I wouldn't run out and buy one until the first time you think your horse has an abscess, and then start keeping them around after that. And then into stuff that you want to chat with your vet about. that would mostly be drugs. Things like the Flamazine I mentioned earlier, that's a wound care product that has an antibiotic in it. Antibiotics themselves, something like Bute, which is a painkiller, and it's not a painkiller, it's an anti-inflammatory. It will help take swelling out. That's something that I have on hand, but I never give it without letting my vet know. Same goes for something like Banamine. Your vet is only going to sell you Banamine like this if they know for sure you're comfortable giving injections, because this has to be given intravenously or orally. I know in the States Banamine makes an oral paste version, and that's probably more convenient for most people, but we can't get it in Canada. So I have this, and I mostly have this on hand for the mares that I'm foaling out, for just in cases. And then dish soap to wash out my buckets and everything like that after. Not something you need to talk to your vet about. That's just the order I had it in. And then anything else you may get from your vet. You might get things like your Telfa pads, your cotton, your gauze from the vet. It is a little bit more expensive, so if you want to buy that stuff ahead of time, I got most of these things on Amazon or from the tack store. Like this I've got left over from a major injury Hope had last year. This is just roll cotton for wrapping underneath a bandage when you've got a big wound that's still oozing, so you don't want to wash these every single day. You can use cotton, which is disposable, but I had to buy this from the vet, and to get the whole roll is expensive. It's not as expensive as if I had bought individual pieces, because I needed to use this for weeks and weeks with her injury last year, but this is something you might get from your vet. And then you can always call your vet up and ask them what they recommend that you have in a first aid kit. They're going to be the best ones to give you that advice anyway. I hope this helped, guys. Like I said, look in the link below. What I've done is made up a chart where you can fill in all of the things in your first aid kit that have an expiry date or that are consumable. So things like your wound care product, your flush, something that you're going to wash with, and I like to tape that to the lid of my bin and write down the expiry dates so that once a year I can take a look and see what's coming up due to expire and replace those things. Or if I use the last of something, I can cross it out, and that reminds me, without having to dig through my whole kit, of what I'm out of and what I need to replace before the next time it's an emergency. So I will create that as a download for you guys, and you can go ahead and grab that from the link below. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. If you enjoyed this video, leave it a like. It really helps me out, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much.